What is up everybody, welcome back to the Crew 2, and in this video I'm going to go over all my favorite vehicles I like to run on all the escapes and their settings as well. So I will be covering the drag race class, the hypercars, the rally raid, also the power boats, then finally the Alpha GP cars as well, at least the vehicles in each class that I like to use. So obviously starting off here with the drag race class, I have a feeling a lot of people are going to know what car I'm probably going to pick for this one. That's going to be the Chevrolet Corvette Stingray. Now, if you guys are probably tired of seeing this car everywhere, I would say that's probably going to be for good reasoning, mainly because this car is honestly that incredible. So I'll show you guys my settings on this right now. And by the way, I will show the settings on each vehicle at the end of the video as well if you guys do want to check that out. But one of the biggest things about the Chevrolet Corvette is the fact that not only is this car going to be really fast, hitting around 413 miles an hour, it also can turn, which is kind of hilarious because obviously this thing is a drag car and you honestly would probably never expect this vehicle to turn as good as it actually does. And if you guys are running escapes and all that, you're probably going to want to use something that can be really fast but also do over 300 miles an hour, at least depending on the escape that you might be doing in that said vehicle class for that matter, or maybe the location of that escape on where it is. So I'm sure a lot of people are probably going after like their said favorite vehicle in that one class that they like to run on everything, and if you guys are looking at the drag cars, you're probably wondering what's going to be the best overall car. Now, in previous videos I have mentioned that the Corvette is probably going to be the best drag car in the game, and even to this day, I would still highly recommend trying out this car for the escapes if you guys have not, and this is also one of my favorite vehicles to use on the speed traps, but that's also going to be a separate video, so do stay tuned for that in the future. But I would say for escapes, guys, depending on where that one location is, I would highly recommend running the Chevrolet Corvette. Like the gameplay you guys see in the background, I feel like this car is going to be the best option. One of the hardest things about the drag cars is to actually make them turn, and I feel like that's definitely going to be a challenge, but getting the right settings on that vehicle and messing around with it for a bit, like being in the right gear around certain turns or approaching that turn going at the right angle is also going to be a big plus, but when it comes to overall stability and handling, I would highly recommend picking the Corvette Stingray. And if you guys are running the escapes, depending on the one you are doing, as I did mention before, I feel like the Corvette Stingray is going to be the best option in this class. And now moving over to my favorite cars to run in the hypercar class. Now for this one, there is actually going to be two that I definitely prefer over all the other ones. Now, one thing I do want to mention though, guys, I'm not saying all the other cars are bad, but these two are definitely going to be my overall favorite picks to use on any of the escapes. So starting off here is probably going to be pretty obvious, the Koenigsegg Regera. I would say this might be one of the best overall cars for escapes as well. At least when it comes to the really weird off-road ones, or maybe the track on that one might be kind of odd, I feel like the Regera is probably going to be one of the best options. Not only is this car only one gear, so if you guys do have to jump down the mountain, that's probably going to be the best option because you will not have to shift through the gears if you are running manual. But the other car that I also pick in the hypercar category is going to be my other favorite vehicle to use, and that car you will indeed have to shift. I'll get into more of that here in a second. So a lot of players have probably been testing out the Koenigsegg Regera for a long time on all the off-road escapes because this car is honestly just that good. If you guys look at many of the leaderboards and pretty much all of the summits, you've probably been noticing the Regera most likely taking over all the leaderboards because I really do feel like this is one of the best cars to use for this. As I did mention, you do not have to shift with this car, which is a big plus, but what's also kind of odd though is I feel like the Regera is going to have some of the best stability off-road, which honestly doesn't make any sense because it's, a hypercar and it's probably something you would never see going down a mountain. But luckily on the Crew 2 we can mess around with that more and have crazy cars like this going off-road. Can you all imagine a rally raid Koenigsegg Regera? My goodness, that would be the craziest thing ever. But one of the biggest things I feel like that really does set the Koenigsegg Regera apart from the other hypercar that I'm going to talk about here in a second is the fact that the stability and overall handling off-road is going to honestly be unmatched in pretty much every way, and I do feel like that's why so many people run this vehicle, and I really feel like you cannot go wrong if you guys do want to have the Koenigsegg for your favorite off-road escape car. Probably going to be the one sentence you never thought you'd ever hear, wanting to have your favorite off-road escape car, which really does not make any sense, guys. But going into my next vehicle is another car that I really do love using on a lot of different things besides the escapes as well, is going to be the beloved Bugatti Divo. Now, the reason why I picked this car is because not only is this thing going to be really fast, but I really do feel like the Bugattis are probably going to be like the jack of all trades in some sense because you really can run them on everything, and I'm sure a lot of players are well aware of how good the Bugatti Divo is, and if you guys did want to run this vehicle on escapes, I feel like it's going to be a really good option. And the footage you guys will be seeing in the background is me doing the same escape with the Bugatti Divo that I did with the Koenigsegg Regera, because I wanted to show how you can also do this with this car as well to show how good this thing really is. But there is a few things I did notice about the Bugatti Divo that is the reason why it's probably my second favorite car in the hypercar category to use over pretty much everything else. And the main reason for that is when it comes to off-roading a Bugatti, which obviously would never actually happen unless we got an insane rally raid version of this car. That would be the craziest thing ever. But nonetheless, if you guys did want to run the Bugatti Divo over the Regera, there's a few things you will have to keep in mind. So the first one is going to be, obviously this car is going to have gears, so if you guys are running manual, you will have to shift the gears a little bit differently on the Devo, especially if you guys are using this thing for off-road escapes, because normally you're probably going down a mountain or jumping over like a mountain to gain more speed. And one of the biggest things I noticed about the Devo is the fact that the higher the gear you're in, the more speed you will end up gaining when going down the mountain and or going over that hill for that extra speed boost. And I feel like that's one thing the Devo is going to have over the Regera, is the fact that I was finding this car to gain speed a little bit faster when going down the mountains because of that one reason. But I did unfortunately notice one flaw with the Bugatti Divo, that I feel like this car also has this issue on the road as well, including the 300 Super Sport. If you guys were to use that Bugatti on the escapes, which by the way, that car would also be really good because of that insane top speed, so if you jumped onto the highway with it, I would say that car is going to be incredible as well. But the reason why I picked the Devo is I did find this car to be a little bit better when it comes to overall stability and handling. I did notice the Bugattis do like getting very fishtaily at certain points, and having something like that off-road is probably going to be a bit of an issue, and I would say the Bugatti Divo is going to be a little bit better than the 300 Super Sport, even though that car is going to be faster, because once you guys are on the highway, it really doesn't matter about 10 miles an hour or so on that aspect, because you're still going to be going really fast, and even the Bugatti Divo can definitely do that. But if you guys are looking for something with more handling and stability, I would highly recommend picking the Koenigsegg Regera over the Bugatti Divo. And now moving over to my favorite truck to run in the Rally Raid class, which is kind of funny because I did have to include at least one vehicle in the actual off-road class for the actual off-road escapes because, well, you normally do not have to use these for those. But I did notice, though, running an actual Rally Raid vehicle on some of them is probably going to be the best option. So for me, guys, it's indeed going to be the Ford Raptor Enforcer unit. This thing is honestly insane, and that is probably for good reasoning, because the Raptor Evo 1 Enforcer unit is probably going to be literally one of the best Rally Raid vehicles in the entire game that you guys can possibly use. And if you wanted to buy one vehicle to use on races and or escapes as well, I would say this is definitely going to be the truck. The Raptor is probably going to be like one of the most balanced trucks in the game, I would say, with handling and stability. It can pretty much do it all, and if you guys are doing some of those off-road escapes, you're going to want to have a higher top speed. This truck can hold speeds of around 180 miles an hour with no issues at all. Meanwhile, some of the other vehicles do obviously struggle getting to 170 or even holding that speed for that matter. Now we have something like the Raptor that can easily do that, and it also handles really well. I did find the stability of this truck to be pretty incredible, and having that's going to be pretty important because, well, obviously some of the off-road escapes are probably going to be in some weird areas covered in trees and or rocks, so having a go-to vehicle that can obviously go really fast but also handle itself in some rough terrain is going to be something many players are probably searching for, and I really do feel like the Raptor is going to be your best option for that. So if you guys are looking for one Rally Raid vehicle that you can run on pretty much everything and completely dominate the escapes when you have to, the Raptor Evo 1 Enforcer unit is probably going to be your best option. And now moving over to the best powerboat to use for escapes is probably going to be pretty obvious as well. It's going to be the 1414 Demon. Now one thing I do want to mention is one of my other favorite boats is the Vector V40R, but if you guys might have been wondering, I would say this boat is way better for slaloms and running it on escapes, and the 1414 Demon is just going to be that good, to be honest. I mean, there's definitely a reason why you see this boat so much in pretty much every single leaderboard, because this boat is honestly that incredible. I would even go as far as saying the 1414 Demon is like a jack of all trades for pretty much everything. This boat is by far going to be the best for escapes, not only because of its stability, but The way the 1414 Demon can also hold speed is going to be pretty incredible as well, because with Nitrochemist this boat does like well over 200 miles an hour pretty easily, and tapping on the nitrous will get this boat pretty much staying around that speed pretty easily as well, so it will definitely be pretty difficult to pick any other boat for the escapes. And not only that, one of the biggest things I noticed with the 1414 Demon is how easy this boat is to control at speed as well, because obviously you guys want something that's going to be stable and not like yeet itself off the track or something like that, or yeet yourself into a rock when trying to go around a turn. And luckily the Demon is going to be the best boat in that aspect as well. So if you guys are looking for an overall boat to use on the escapes, I would highly recommend taking a look at the 1414 Demon. And now moving over to the final class where I recommend my favorite vehicles for all the escapes on the Crew 2 here is going to be the Alpha GP category. So I'm sure a lot of players have been kind of mixed on what car to pick for this, because obviously like the Red Bull is going to be insanely fast doing like 295 miles an hour or so. These Red Bulls are going to be insanely incredible for that, but to be honest, I feel like one of their issues, which is going to be the agility of the Red Bulls, which I feel like is not going to be all that great. So for me, guys, I'm going to have to pick the KTM Expo R for this. And if you guys have seen some of the gameplay I do on the summits and all that with escapes, I normally am running the Expo R. But just in case you guys might not be a big fan of the KTM Expo R, which I honestly can understand that, I would recommend trying out the Alpha Mark X. This is probably one of my other favorite Alpha vehicles in the Crew 2 as well. This car is going to be a really good option. Not the best agility, but I do find this one to be a lot better than the Red Bull cars, so I do recommend trying out the Alpha Mark X if you guys do want to try out a different vehicle in general. But for me, I'm going to have to pick the KTM Expo R for the most part, because I feel like the agility on this car is going to be completely unmatched compared to everything else. Now, obviously, guys, this car isn't going to have the highest top speed, with it being around like 274 miles an hour, compared to like the Red Bull, again, doing around 295, and I believe the Mark X is like 268 or something around that, so it's going to be a little bit slower than the KTM, but even with that, I feel like the KTM is going to be the best option for the escapes because of the way this car can get around turns super quickly. It obviously does accelerate really good as well, because every single Alpha GP car does, but if you guys are looking for like the best overall option to get these escapes done quickly and have something like almost really good for some of the ones that have a lot of turns, I would say the Expo R is going to be your best option, because with this car being smaller, it seems to be a lot better for getting around turns a little bit quicker, but also maneuvering away from cars when there's a lot of traffic all over the place, which obviously on the escapes, you're probably going to encounter cars being in very bad places sometimes, and I would find the Expo to be really good for getting away from those situations a little bit easier than like the Red Bull, because of the way this car can maneuver out of the way, and I think it is going to be a lot better in that aspect. And that's probably why I see so many of these cars pretty much all over the place depending on the escape that's out that week in the summit, because the KTM is probably going to be that good of an option, and depending on what the escape is going to be, you're probably not going to want to pick a hypercar because of all those turns, and that's when the Alpha GP cars definitely shine because of the way they can handle and get up to speed so dang quickly. But let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below, because I do feel like with all the escapes that constantly show up in the summits, it's definitely going to be a really good idea to get that one specific vehicle that you can run on that one, which would definitely help when going after the highest scores possible on these skills. And I also do want to mention, guys, I'm also planning on covering all the other skills as well, including my favorite vehicles and their settings to run, so definitely stay tuned for that in the near future.